All right, so this week 10, the topic for this week 10 is managing state information. And it's a very important part of any web application, any true dynamic web application, to keep the states, like, states of the user. When user is basically logged into a website, what are the different things that a user can do? Maybe as a client, what user can do, maybe as an admin, what user can do, and things like that. So we need to keep that state information, number one. Number two, if you see that when you go to your online shopping websites, from one page to you purchase something, then on other page you purchase something else, on the third page you purchase something else. So you need to keep all those things into your basket, and that basket is of course a virtual basket that runs with our with our session. When we are working on website, I go from one page to the other page, and to the other page we see that we are recognized not only as, for example, a user, typical user, but also our basket goes with us on different pages. you know so now how does that do that? Like, how does a web application basically achieve this? So the web applications do what? They use the concepts of cookies and sessions. Now if you see here, we have got three things over here: cookies, sessions, and encryption. And the far most important are cookies and sessions, but then there is encryption, which is for authorize, for security, and we'll talk about that. So up to this point, of course, we have been building simple applications as examples how to use the basic building blocks and concepts of a website. However, one of the core concepts that almost all serious websites will use have been missing. And what is that? Concept of state. As I said, state is very, very, very important. One of the most common uses for state is having users logs in on a website. So user login on a website is basically state. That once you are logged into a website as a typical user, every page of that website should recognize that you are logged in, you are a legitimate user, right? So every page, every should recognize you. So for that, what websites do, they will use a state management. Now, adding a login and a user accounts to a website is not that difficult, and it will enable you to secure certain routes and make sure information is only available to be viewed by the correct audience. So yes, your application will be only seen, only accessed by the typically authorized users, typically right user, the correct audience. You don't want to show everything to every user. The first point is this, that you don't want to show everything to every user. You want to show the correct thing to correct user, right? So not everyone will be eligible, not everyone is required to see those. There are three pieces required in your application to be able to deliver this. As I said, three pieces. One is called cookies, second one is called sessions, and third one is called encryption. So we are talking about cookies and session in this lecture. You see, we'll be discussing cookies and session in this lecture, briefly touch on encryption as it applies to cookies and session. In week 12, we will go into more details on encryption. So we'll be next week, we'll be talking more about the encryption, very much detail. That's a very important topic. We'll be talking about certain APIs. But here, we're saying that we'll be talking about cookies and sessions. So does anyone have this cookies concept? What are the cookies? In general terms, in general language, how can you define a cookie? Anyone? What do you feel that what are cookies? And of course, these are not the cookies that you like most, chocolate cookies, right? So what are these cookies? Anyone? IDK is an appropriate answer. IDK is a very good answer. So if you think that you don't know, you can just write down an IDK. Stored in client side. For what, Saroj? For what? Yeah. Cookies are stored on client side. For what? Why do we store them? Piece of information. Now you see, yes, piece of information stored on client side Yes. For what? Yes. So for what? For keeping information of the user. Keeping information of the user. Let me just give you a very quick, diagrammatic representation to that. Let me just draw something. This is a server, right? This is a server. This is you as a client, right? You are a client. You request a website, right? You are requesting a website. What website does is it basically provides you a file which is called cookie. Now, what does it do? Cookie is a file that comes into your system and it is stored somewhere in your system. It resides somewhere in your system. What does that mean? That means that there is a file that server has kept in your system, as like in our system as a client, and this file has certain important piece of information. What is that important information? Or anyhow, whatever is that information, first let's talk about then what will happen. So you request a website is keeping up a cookie into your system. Now this request end, like for example ends, or this session ends, for example, whatever, and then you again go back to this website, or you request something else from that website. That website will now go and check the cookie, whether that cookie is present over there or not. It will check the cookie. If it finds that cookie, website will understand, okay, so you are the person who has visited us before, and you have got this file inside that one, and I have put some information inside that one. I can find out that information. And that information, to start with, can be customizations that you want your, for example, Gmail to be of black color, so your customization should be saved in your cookie. So whenever you just come back onto that Gmail website, it will go to your cookie, find out what settings did you apply for your email box, and it will just apply those settings to that particular thing. Number one. Number two, as I said, that you are doing an online shopping or something, and you want to maintain few things, so it has sent a cookie, and for example, item one has been placed in that cookie, and then you again go back to purchase other something, so that cookie gets updated. Second product, third product, fourth product, and all those products are added, and then when you just proceed to check out, it will just go and find out the information of that alive cookie that is alive with you, and find out. Now there is one more thing: sessions. What is the session? That every website, of course, will be interacting with a database, maybe it's MongoDB or whatever. So the sessions are maintained on servers. Sessions are maintained on servers, and the clients clients get what cookies in general, in its, in its real sense. This happens. Sessions are stored in, what are sessions? Anyone? We have talked about cookies. Now if you can tell me about sessions, what are sessions? So let me just answer that. So sessions are also for the same purpose, more or less, and they are kept within the server. So server will store them. Now they also just keep this mind. For example, as I said, for example, sometimes they will be just keeping track of the user ID and password. The user and password that you have provided, that would be saved in the database, and session will be taking care of that. Session will go to the database, for example, and session will store your name and password into itself, and when you will be just keep on visiting it. So session is basically a temporary meeting of client with server. So that meeting will typically be recorded by the server. So okay, no problem. So basically what happens is that session resides on the server, and the client resides on the client, session resides on the server, and cookies reside on the client. Now see here, cookies are pieces of data that are passed back and forth from the browser to the server that holds state information about the current audience interacting with your application. So a mix of cookies and session will be doing what? It will be giving a pass back and forth from the browser to the server. So server sends it back, and browser were requesting something, server again goes and read that cookies and takes some decisions. So hold information about the current audience interacting with your application. Cookies are not set and maintained automatically. You have to code this functionality to your application to support it. So we need to code our cookies, and we'll be coding those cookies shortly, right? So if you see, sorry, I have to remove the drawing. So if you see, as we have learned, each time a request is made from the browser to a response is sent to the server from the server, and there is set of headers attached to the data payload. So you remember, whenever we just send request something, some payload headers are there. Headers are there with the payload, right? So request headers contain the cookie header, and response headers contain the set cookie header. So request header contain the cookie header and response set cookie, right? These headers are string of semicolon separated value refer in a server-side code through rack object. The most common type of we want to place in the cookie is a session value. So cookie will be, will have these two values. If you see here, here's an example. So session contains information about the user, and session is placed as one of many potential key value pairs as data in more cookies. Now here is example of what cookie might look like. So see here what cookie might look like. So cookie value would look like something like this: a session something, a value something. And here is an example of set cookie header in a response from the server to update it after a request, right? So if you want to set up a cookie, this will be the set cookie option, and we'll see both of them shortly. I'll show you how this cookie usually work. So let me just show you an example of that, and you would definitely. So I have set up this this Express server over here, and with everything, node and everything, my server is running over here, and I want you people to show you. I want to show you people that how these session works. Now, to make these sessions work, welcome back. I hope now you will be joining us. So what we are doing is that we have just discussed this like session and cookies in general, and now we will be just looking at an example, and I will be just giving an example of cookie and set cookie, and we'll be talking about the sessions as well. So if you see here, I've just set up a server, and I want you people to just set up a server. And there are different types of APIs that you might need. The one I am using is basically called as Express Sessions. Express Session. I want to use this one. I want to require this one, right? And now what I want to do is that I would like to, of course, if I'm using it, I need to install that as well. So let me just open up another terminal window, and let me just npm install Express Session. I'm just installing Express Session over here, this one. So install that one. Now Express Session is installed. Hopefully now it should work. And now we need to define a middleware for that. So I'm just defining a middleware. So you can just follow it up, and I'll tell you everything, because in our today's discussion, everything will come. So I will be defining a session over here, and this session will have certain objects inside that, and I'll let you know what are those objects. Very interesting objects. This session have one key or secret that would generate, for example, key that would generate session. It will generate a session. We just define a key, any string that would go and generate the session for us, right? And then we have resave not equal to, this will be column, right? Resave false. What does that mean? For every session, don't create a new session, rather than preserve the resave is equal to false means we don't want it to just generate new session for all the time. Rather, it should recognize the previous sessions that had been stored, right? And then there is another option, save uninitialized, and we do it false again. And why we do it false again? Why? Because if we have to change the session, save uninitialized equal to false, that should not show the values to that particular thing, right? So these are the three options that we are right now setting. There are lots of options that we can set. So again, I'm just repeating. Secret, the key that would be used to generate the session will be generated on that basis, on the basis of this one, right? And then resave is equal to false. We have done. For every session, don't create a new session, rather than use the previous one. So all the time, whenever I access an application, you are not required to create a new session, rather use the previous one, right? And save uninitialized equal to false. If we have not changed the session, don't save it. So if we are not making any changes, just no need to save that one, right? Just save that one. And let's define one of the root, like, the basic root for our application, app.get. And this is, a request response. So now in this, what I want to say, I want to just do one thing, console.log. Now I'm consoling.log. What? Rec.session. As I said, that rec will be maintaining a session over there, right? So I have just stored this one, rec.session. So whenever user will revisit that one, so what is that? Log 8080. Let me just visit that. Let's see if it runs. Yes. So server running. And if you see here, it is showing the cookie. We have just consoled that one. So you see here, it is showing as the request.session. What session is maintained? That session is containing this cookie. And I'll show you that as well shortly. You see here, everyone? Why it is not showing the root? Okay, 8080. It's not showing that one. Let me just terminate that job and let's start that again. Maybe sometimes it happens. So it shows me this cookie over here, and let's. Why is not server showing? Do you see something? Because it's not showing any error here. That's interesting. So you have the same. Okay. Let me just check because sometimes Oh, okay. We are not sending anything. Let's send something. So we are using first session in Express. Just send something over here. Now you see session over here as well, and you see here first session. So we are not sending something. Right? Got it? So now we are just looking at it. And if I just go here over here in inspect, and I go to application, and here if I go to cookies, you see here that it is being setting some session, some cookies, and I'll show you which one it is setting us for right now. So if you see here that there is some this connect.sid, because I'm just connecting, or I'm just making it with a default value. So if you see here that it is generating a connect.sid, the session ID, and this is the session ID. If you see here at the bottom, it is showing that. Now this might not change. If I just refresh it, it is just showing the same. It is not changing. Now if I want it to change all the time, whenever I just request something, if I request something, because I've just done that, resave is equal to save initialize is equal to false. So now what I want to do is that I can set up a value rec.session.isAuth. IsAuth, I will set is equal to true. Right? What does that mean? Now you see here, if I visit my page, first of all, I visit my page, and let's see here. So first of all, we see here, now isAuth is equal to true. Now isAuth is equal to true means what? Now I'll show you the difference. If you see here, if I go to inspect and application, and in this cookie, if you see here that this is now, this will be changing now. Like you see that right now it is showing MIHEZ3 whatever. And if I just go through again, you see, so right now it is showing the same. But again, let me just copy this one. If you see here, we can just print that as well, like console. Let's console it and check it that whether it is the same one or not. So rec.session.id. So we have got something called a session ID. If you just save it here and see, and if you run that, okay, just run that. So if you see here, that we are getting this JUQTV, something like that. And if I go in my browser window and inspect that whether it is the same or not. Okay. Yes. Okay. So if you see here, JUQTVLA, if you see here, now is it the same to this one? Of course it is same with some different values. So if I show you here, okay. So if you see here, that both of them are showing the same. See JUQ. So if you see here, JUQTVIA. So now what we have done, we have just captured that request.session.id. Session has generated an ID for us. And here, as I said, this connect.sid is the default name for that. And it is just showing us that connection ID, that I have created this connection ID, and the cookie value is this one. And if I print that cookie value over here, do you see the same one? So now you are able to see everything that we have just done. Is auth is equal to true. Now it is just not only just changing that, and it's just representing that query and that cookie value over here for us. Can you see that? Yes. Any response? Oh, you are not for an unencrypted sessions. Well, rather we'll be going for encrypted sessions, so that if the session like data is being captured, is being compromised, it is not useful for the others. So so how do we implement them? So you see here, implementing session is now a fairly simple task in Express.js. The platform is matured. There are lots of libraries. As I said, one of the libraries that we have used, if you see here, we have used this Express session. There is a client session as well that they have used in their application, and I'll show you what is the difference between those two. The most popular library for implementing client session is the client sessions node library, which they have used. If you see here, in their example, they are using client sessions. I have used the Express session, if you see, and I'll tell you what is the difference between these two. There is a slight difference between these two. Not slight, there is a difference between these two, right? So this library focuses on keeping sessions between the client and server on the client side. So this is the point. Client sessions store the sessions on the client side of yours. They do not take these values to the server side. Like again, we'll be talking about when, for example, you are connecting your application to the database and you want to store that session on the database. Then you might not be using client sessions. Rather, you would be going for the Express sessions, as I have done. And I will give this example. As I said, in next class, I'll complete this example where I will just store that in the database as well. So client session is used for doing what? For simple lightweight operations. Like for example, you are keeping the sessions between the client and server on the client side. This has several advantages over storing the session on the server side and keeping track of it on the server. For example, if the server restarts and you do not have session information in the persistent storage location, the session will be lost and all your data will be, users will be logged out any time of server. So again, it has its own advantage that the session is stored at the client side, but the session can be stored on the server side as well, as I said, when you are making Express sessions. The client session stored on the client side, Express session stored on the server side. It is also beneficial to keep your sessions on the client side and have them continuously sent with each request, because this enables you to host a website that has multiple web servers and session will be still. So client side has these advantages over that one, because this enables you to host a website that has multiple web servers and the session will still maintain regardless of which server is used to process the response in environment. So what is happening? As I said, they're telling us that if you keep your session on client, right, not on server. So the server, like again, for example, a website is hosted on multiple servers. This is a very important concept. So if you will keep the cookie or the session information on the client side, this is our session information, right? Session. So they say that if you'll do this client session thing and you'll store your data, session on the client side, what will happen is that whenever you go to the website, you will be recognized from this session ID or this client session, which is stored in your system. So what happens if this server goes down and you are having your cookie or the session maintained in your client system? What happens is seamlessly seamlessly your request transfer to this one, and this server does not need to do anything else. Rather, it will go and check that client session, and if it finds it, it will seamlessly it will give you the services. You're getting the point? This is a very important point, and you know this plays a very important role when you work in the those distributed databases like MongoDB or others, when you are doing that distribution of databases. So again, you say that client session has different advantages. One of the advantage, if you change your server by some reason, because this has gone down, this has also gone down, so you will be seamlessly transferred to next server, and next server will quickly check your cookie, and it will let you know that okay, that you are the legitimate user. Right? So this is how this client session will work. So multiple load balance, you will need to make sure each user's request always same this. So again, load balancing, as I was saying, this is a very important paragraph. I would like all of you to just have a read of it, what it says, because it's a very important one. That's why I'm reading it out. In one environment where sessions are kept track on the server, and you have multiple web servers that are load balanced, you will need to make sure each user's requests are always sent to the same web server with each request to preserve their session. So if session is being maintained on server, the client has to always interact with that server. If that server goes down, that client has no information left. Alternatively, you could attempt to replicate server session information between web servers. However, this can be very complex. For these reasons, storing session the client makes scaling and session management a lot easier. So this has its own, but again, it's not that complex as they're saying, because I will be giving you an example of express session storing on database. Now, authorization and authentication. So we usually mix these two terms, but they are very different. You know, authentication, authorization mean two different things, entirely different things. It can be easy to confuse them. So let's discuss them in a little bit before we begin to log in, to implement sessions and secure endpoint. This will enable you to be more comfortable explaining and debugging two different concepts. Authentication is who are you, right? Who are you? Involves supplying credentials to identify yourself, server, and establish a session for your user account. Authorization is what do you have access to. So maybe you are a user of a company, you are a user of a database, but you do not have access to particular things, right? So authentication will authenticate you that yes, you are a client, so you are an employee for our company. But authorization will tell you that after logging in, what are the areas where you can go and what are the areas where you cannot go, what are the things that you can access, what are the things that you cannot access. That's a very important concept. It involves checking your permissions to resources that have requested and act accordingly. You may be authenticated with the server and have a server user session that might not be authorized to view a certain resource, no permissions. Now see here, this is a video that
before we get started talking about the different authentication mechanisms that MongoDB supports, I want to clarify a common point of confusion. Authentication and authorization are commonly interchanged with one another, but they're actually two very different things.
So can you hear the video as well, like the audio as well? Are you people able to hear the audio? Okay, that's good. That's good. Let me just start that again.
Before we get started talking about the different authentication mechanisms that MongoDB supports, I want to clarify a common point of confusion. Authentication and authorization are commonly interchanged with one another, but they're actually two very different things. Authentication is the process by which we verify the identity of a user, whereas authorization is the process by which we verify the privileges of a user. The best way to think about it is that authentication answers the question, who are you? Whereas authorization answers the question, what do you have access to? I can be authenticated to a system, but I might not be authorized to control a certain resource. Authentication enables us to do authorization. Once we know who you are, we can then ask, what do you have access to?
Okay, so what is that? Now basically what it is showing, it is giving us that information that what is authorization and authentication all about. Who are you and what do you have access to, right? So now status codes. Status codes are very important, and we have talked about these status codes. 200 plays a very, very important role. So if you see, there are a number of standard HTTP response status codes that can be used by your application to inform the browser whether a request was rejected because of authentication problem or authorization problem. So you see here, so they have their their definite meaning. 401 status code says unauthorized, authentication error. The resource exists, but it requires the user to be authenticated first to view it. It may also require permissions and be checked again and authenticating from the proper authorization. You see, we just overlook these status codes, but these have their different meaning. 401 says unauthorized. 403 status code says forbidden, authorization error. The resource exists, but the user does not have permission to that, right? The user has logged in, user is authorized, so 401 is not coming. Rather, 403, forbidden. You are not allowed to access, for example, you are not allowed to access this page. You are not allowed to access this typical something. Have you ever noticed this 401 and 403 errors? Like specifically 401 and 403 errors. Have you ever experienced, or anyone, Daniel? Okay, yes. So now 404 status code not found. So basically, these resources were not found on the server. This is commonly used when URL is requested. That does not exist. This is a very common one that we usually see, but we usually ignore this 401 and 403 type of things. So now you must know that if the error code returning is 401, you should know that the user is unauthorized, right? And 403 is coming, the user is logged in, user exists, resource exists, but user is not authorized to see that authorization error, right? Okay, so adding sessions to an Express.js application. How we can add these sessions? And I have shown you Express example, like this example Express session. Now we'll be using this client session over here, which they are using. So now that we are explained what cookie session, authentication, authorization, and status codes are, we can get to the coding part of the lecture and see how it all comes together. We'll break down the project to add client sessions, handling into 4 parts. So we'll be handling what? Client sessions, as I said. Add the client session to the library to the project, create a middleware as we have done in the previous example, write a login route to process a post login to establish authentication of a user session, add a middleware function that handles checking for authorization of a user. So we'll do that, these 4 parts. So let's do first thing. First of all, because I have installed Express session, now I need to install the client session. So just save that, print that and run that. Okay, so now that an Express session is installed. Now you see here. So we just required this one, client session. So I will just do that as well. So now we have client sessions as well, right? And now what we need to do. So you see here, they will be needing body parser and Express handlebars as well. And let's do that as well, side by side, and then we'll be just, so it means we need to install them as well, right? So we'll be using these one as well, right? So let npm install Express handlebars, right? So we'll be using that handlebars space body parser. Let's install both of them. So both of them will be installed, and we have required them, right? Because our application is looking for that. Now we are not using that environment port. We have just set up that port, no problems. And then create a middleware function to set up client session. So now we'll be creating a middleware function. So you see that, you remember that we have to set up this app engine and we need to create a views folder. So let's do that. So we are just doing that, and let's create a new folder inside that and call that views, and we'll be just storing our like HBS files inside that one, right? Right. So set up static folder, and again, these are all the previous things. Let me just get them out of the way, and then we'll talk about the real thing. Now see here, they are defining this client sessions. As we defined this session, you remember, we defined this session for that particular thing. Here they are defining a client session over here, app.use client session. Now this is a very different one. like, not different. They are just defining different values for that. The first value is that cookie name, session, secret. So there is the key. As I said, you remember that we talked about the key over there. So this is the secret key over here. Duration 2 into 60 into 1000. Duration of the session in milliseconds, 2 minutes. We are setting a session 2-minute duration. Active duration 1000 into 60. The session will be extended by this many as like milliseconds each request, 1 minute. So 1 minute it will just add every time. We'll be just refreshing that, right? And then we use body parser encoded, like, we need to do that body parser URL encoded when, because we have done that and we want to use that as well. So I'm just giving that as well. Okay, so now what we have done, we have set up middleware client session where we have just defined cookie name, secret, duration, active duration. And what we are doing, we are setting this client session over here. Okay, so now write a login route handler. Now we need to set up a login route handler which will username. So we are not using this on HTTP start. If you need, you can just use that. But you see here, they're defining a simple user over here. This is very important. And I need to define this user. Let's go back here and let's define this user over here. What is that? We are just defining a constant user. And as I said, I will be giving you an example of MongoDB database where we'll be storing that database inside that, like, user storage inside that. But right now we are using this user to authenticate user, right? We are just defining it over here, which we never do, right? Okay, so first route is direct login. We have to define first route as login. So let me just take out this one because I don't need this one now. I'm not using this client express sessions now. So what I'll do is that, let me just take that from there. So I want to, like, let's set up these all one for saving the time, and I'll let you know that what they are doing. So let's set them. Now you see here what's happening. So set up a route. On the route, the URL to redirect to login. We'll be just redirecting to login. Whenever user comes to this one, we'll directly take them to login, number one. Number two, on that login, we are saying that you just go and render login. So what is this login now? Do I need to make this login file? And if yes, where I need to make this file? Anyone? Yes, anyone? Where do I need to make this render login file? I need to create that, which is not there. So where should I create this login? Yes, to create login, but where should I store this one? Yes, that's right. That's very good. Thank you. Now I need to create that login.hbs, right? I'll be creating this login.hbs, and of course it will be giving that. So first of all, let's discuss that. All right. So now I'll be creating this login. Layout is equal to false. You remember that we are not defining a default layout for this HBS. So that's why we are doing layout false. App.post. See here, this is very important. When user will post this information, right, from the form, we are doing one thing. Const username is equal to rack.body.username. So take from that form the username, take that from password. I hope everyone is getting that. Now check that if the username is null or password is null, anything is null, we'll say return rs.render login, return that user to the login, and error message is equal to missing credentials. And again, layout false. We don't want to give any. So error message will be generated missing credential. And let me just write something or more here. Fill both fields. Just for nothing, I wanted to add that one. Fill both fields. Error message I'm just giving. Now, if username is equal to, so you see here, if username, which we have extracted out the body, if username is equal to user.username, what is this user? Can anyone tell me what is this user? This is the user that we have defined over here, right? So we have defined sample user. So if we are checking that whether the user, the form submitted username is matching to user.username and password is password.username, password name, password. So what happens is that if they are matching, rack.session.user. So set up a user variable in that one. That's a very important point. We are setting up a session variable. As you remember, we have talked about that session is created. We can set certain values in that as well. That would be needed to recognize to the other page. So if you see here, rack.session.user equal to username, user.username, whatever has come, and email is equal to user.email, right? And do what? res.redirect and give it a response dashboard. So it means we need another file inside this views. And what is that file? Dashboard.hbs, because we are talking about HBS. We have set up that HBS. We'll be using HBS function. Have we set up that engine? Yes, this set engine. We have done that set engine view engine. All right. So now if you see that I'll have this redirect dashboard, else if the user is not authenticated, it will say render login, invalid username and password. Try again. So I'm just adding another information over here, right? So just go and try again. And now another route, app.get layout logout. If user presses the logout, if goes to logout function, session.reset. We want to delete that session, right? The session that we set up should be reset, should be deleted. Raise.redirect login and do what? Redirect is equal to login. We are just setting that to redirect. Now you see here. So these are all the things that we have set. Add the middle function that checks for the authorization. Now you see here, we need to set something over here. We are first of all checking is a middleware that will be checking Insured Login. And let's talk about that. Let's first set that one. App.get right dashboard Insured Login. So it means we need to have this Insured Login function, which will check that whether user session has been created or not. I hope everyone is getting that. Whether user session is created or not, it will be checking that one. So you see here, what Insured Login does, it's a middleware which does rack.session not, if that rack.session.user is not settled. And you know, rack.session.user will be settled when? Once these two are matching. You getting that? When these two are matching, the rack.session.user will be set. And if it is set, it will redirect to login. Again, if Insured Login will be called, and else it will be redirect, else it will be going to the next one. You know, this is why we are setting it as a middleware. And here we are saying that if someone goes to dashboard, if someone access to dashboard, you just do check Insured Login and then do what? If that all this is successful, rs.render dashboard user request.session.user, and you just pass this user from this request.session.user. Layout is equal to false, right? Now let's talk about our files, login.hbs that we have created, but we have not filled it up. Let's create that login.hbs, go to login.hbs and store that, save, and let's create dashboard.hbs. So they are both simple files. I'll discuss them, but first let's create them. So both of the files here, login.hbs doing what? If there is an error message, it will just generate that error message in H5 form, or else please log in below. It will show you as the form. Like again, if there is no error message, so what is the form? Post method is equal to post and login. You see that action is equal to login. So it will go to the login by itself when we submit it. So their name is equal to username, type is equal to text password. And what is dashboard? Dashboard is just simply hello user.username. So you know, we are passing this value to this one over here. See here in dashboard, we are passing request.session.user. So you accept that username, user.name, and you say that email is user.email, where we have this information stored for you. Right now, let's run this one. Hopefully, that should work if we have done everything correct. Now, server is running. Let's check our server now. Okay, let me just close that for the time being. Now you see that we have reached to the login because we have set up that. So if I just first of all check it empty, if I go send it empty, you see missing credential, fill both fields. The fill both fields by one spelling is wrong anyhow. So if I enter ABC and ABC as a password, you see it says invalid username or password. Try again. And now what will work? Sample user. If I do sample user, and what is the password? Sample password. Login, and now we are logged into what? Our dashboard. And this dashboard receives this information. We are not showing this username over here. Let's show that username also. Hello, this user. Okay, it's showing the hello message with the sample user and this username. Let me just show that with that as well. You see here, we can just do that here. User.username. Right. So now if you refresh it, sample user is also here. Do people see that? Everyone is having this like running like this.